Hello and welcome to this episode of the Rich Revolutionaries podcast. We have another unique episode where we're flipping the roles, and Audree is going to put me in the hot seat today. So, some of you might be familiar with Audree. She has recorded an episode with me before, and we're kind of like co-weaving worlds together. Audrey is a phenomenal telepathic mentor, and I love, love, love your approach to mentorship. It is unlike anything else that I've seen on the market. And you guide people into their highest potential in a way that is so grounded and organic, like us sitting in the grass and the trees right now. And so that's why I wanted to invite you on to set the stage in a way that is unique to you, to give the viewers a different perspective on who I am and what I do. So the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Shanice, for this beautiful introduction.
Mhm.
I have known you for less than a year now, and since then, I saw you go through several spirals of death and rebirth. And I know that lately you've been in the midst of an ego death and a rebirth portal. And I'd like to start with that today, asking you what is real and what is at stake for you right now in that rebirth spiral?
Mm. Getting right into the meat and potatoes. So in the past couple of months, I have moved from my apartment in Puerto Escondido, where my partner and I were living in Mexico. And we moved with the expectation that we were receiving a job offer that included accommodation in Riviera Maya on the other coast. And after giving the keys back to the apartment, packing up our car, and starting on our journey, the retreat owner ghosted us. And so suddenly we had no home, no job prospect. And I had also been heavily investing from debt in a business mentorship that we were both in together. And it came to a point where I was like, well, I simply have maxed out my resources in terms of credit cards, line of credit, um, gifts and loans from family. And so I had to make the choice to dissolve that agreement, which wasn't done lightly. So those anchors of home, of job, of mentorship dissolved. And you can imagine at the same time of like my root chakra being on fire, my relationship with my partner also took a toll because there was a lot of pressure on us to like both be figuring it out. So that was another anchor that was like influx in the crumble, the void stage. Um, and then at the same time, I closed the Born to Be Wild challenge that I was hosting with 55 newer CEOs inside. It was the biggest space, thank you, that I had held in my business to date. So I was like on this big high and then everything is just kind of crumbling. So where I am now in the rubble of that is we are renting a room in a friend's home in the center of Mexico. Um, my partner has just been like a championing it, like has like five different business deals that he is in the works of right now. And final details are closing out on a contract for a beachfront hostel in Puerto Escondido. So we will be returning there in the next like 3-ish weeks. So it's still like the final contract hasn't been signed. We don't have like a a place to land yet. So things are very much still in flux in this moment. So with that, I've taken a bit of a step back, which is like the opposite of the advice most business mentors will give you. Say, when you have momentum, keep the foot on the pedal, keep moving forward. And I'm not doing this just to make money. I'm not doing this just to achieve milestones, just to have a certain status. I'm doing this for the long run and in a way that allows for my identity to evolve in an organic process rather than a forced one. And so for me, that's going to look like having these big collapse moments where all the structures around me are crumbling, including the inner ones. And finding my footing in that looks like taking more time to dance in the backyard with the plants, having more low pressure calls, being less present in online spaces because that's all very like mind focused, like masculine forward moving energy, which is great when you have those inner structures in place. But that energy without the structure is just like building in quicksand, which I have done for a long time. And I have accumulated the wisdom that that is not how I want to move forward.
Wow, this is a lot. I just want to take the time to acknowledge everything you are going through right now and the level of instability and this walk in the unknown that is very special. And I feel that what you name as the collapse moment, with all the structures around you dying, including the internal ones, this is part of your brand as a rebirth queen.
Yes.
And what I'd like to know from there is what are the lessons that you are learning now, more
Mm,
precisely? And how are these lessons leading to maybe your next signature program or your next mentorship space or your next move as a New Earth CEO?
hmm Okay. I'm gonna keep it focused on business for this one because there's like it's so multi-layered. We could do a podcast for each lesson. Um, but in business, like I have a very clear vision of where I'm going, of what I'm created. As many of you have heard before, the farm dream recently deemed like agri-hoods, eco-residential retreat center. And so that's never like a shaky question in my mind. That's still happening. However, because that's so clear and not only in my mind, like in my body, like it feels real now, I have had a tendency to show up and act as if, right? And that's the advice that is given to visionary entrepreneurs, which can be great advice. However, the lesson that I'm learning right now is discernment. I feel like I'm always learning more on discernment. It's like this sharpening of an edge that continues always. And when I chose to make the leap into a high level mentorship space, I took everything in at face value and I'm like, okay, like this is what people do to get the thing that I want. Let me try this on. And like it took a few like trial and errors, but the challenge model that I tried on, I had great success with. However, because there was still an unconscious gap in, I like to say, like, I was operating in a post-revenue identity with a pre-revenue nervous system. hmm And so, although I was able to show up as if it was real, I believed it, I felt it, others did too. I wasn't able to anchor that frequency, anchor that identity sustainably, regeneratively, because there's still frequencies of grief, of fear, of shame that exist in my body. And that isn't something that I can override with vision, with mentorship, with identity. It has to be moved through in an organic process for me because I'm choosing to walk this journey of like embodied evolution. And so, what that means for my business is I'm actually in a process of reconfiguring my offer suite. And again, that's like it's not something that is stabilized. You heard it here first, right? So, when I joined that mentorship space, I went from holding a 3-month offer at like just over $2,000. I'd had one person complete the full program, and then I jumped to offering a 12K year-long program. Will I still offer that? Yes. That is the rebirth program. That's not going anywhere. However, rather than building backwards from that, to fill in like the gaps of the offer suite, I'm actually going to bring back more of like not entry level offers because the content will still be of the level of truth and potency that I'm here to deliver in terms of someone who like has an existing business, who's sold offers before, who is willing to look at the unconscious power dynamics that exist in the collective. But the context, I'm going to allow more grace for myself to actually like reintroduce a 3-month offer at a lower price point and maybe even like look at some of the price points for my entry offers too of that are audacious and the newest one that I had come through initiation. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Um, but like essentially where I am in my business, like I want to be inviting people into offers. And if there's such a big gap between what feels safe for me to receive in my nervous system to what my identity like of this like farm owner wants to create, then it's my responsibility to scaffold that gap rather than try to override from the belief that fear is the green light.
That's a powerful lesson, and there's something coming to me right now. I don't know if this question makes sense, but you will tell me. How do
Mhm.
we remain audacious with discernment when everything is crumbling? So I will just repeat it because I was wobbly in my in my pronunciation. How do we remain audacious with discernment when everything is crumbling?
Mm.
That's the question that is coming through right now.
Mm-hmm. For me, what's coming through is our willingness to be seen vulnerably in the crumble and in the instability. And mean, like, I don't really know. Like, all of this stuff is like kind of like going to shit right now. Like, do I know where I'm going to be living next month? Like, not exactly. And I'd say that most people would see audacious as hitting the consistent revenue markers, of having the big events, of saying the like bold, daring things. And that's true too. And like you said, your question of like when everything's crumbling, like how do you still be audacious? Be real and raw and true with what is going on behind the scenes. Let people in. And that's uncomfortable, right? Like I'm sweating right now. And like for me, that's okay because I think that my leadership is not only when things are, shiny and like I want to share them, but my leadership is also my willingness to show up when I would rather hide and like allow shame to solidify around um the circumstances of my life right now. But that is a disservice to me, to the people I'm here to serve, to the mission at large, to the evolution of the collective, because it's saying that this here now moment is not going to change. And so it's something I need to hide. But that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So to be audacious in those moments is to be like, hey, this is what's up. Like, I don't have anything to hide. Like, my what I'm sharing might change because the reality of my life is changing right now. Like, does it make sense for me to get on my stories and sell every day when, like, I don't know what price point I'm selling at? Like, I don't really have a stable identity structure or home life. Like, maybe for some people, but for me, it doesn't. And that's okay. And that can be audacious too.
So audacity as in showing up in a vulnerable moment. And usually being audacious also entails the willingness to take surprising and bold risk. But what
Hmm.
is a risk when the root chakra is not fulfilled? Like what is risk take? What does it mean to take risks that are bold and surprising when the root chakra is not fulfilled? So again, it's all value based. We can
Hmm.
judge like what is right, what is wrong, but what is very important here is the discernment that you brought up, like what feels true for me right now.
Hmm.
And I feel that in a space where we are always very inspired by successful mentors who have taken really bold risks and have been surprising, like this is why they are popping out. This is why they are different. This is why we are looking at them. So I totally understand sometimes this feeling also of not that you mentioned that, but I include myself in thinking that sometimes we will compare ourselves where
Hmm.
we are and where our mentors are and wonder like, okay, what if I would take the same type of risk? What does it mean for me and how do I feel about it? Um, my next question is an interesting one about identity because you mentioned the identity aspect as well. So,
Hmm.
how do you know when it's time to burn an identity rather than evolve with it? Because you're also evolve with Shanice on your Instagram. So I feel that embodied evolution is something that you're working with a lot. So yes, what are the signs for you that you're ready to release an identity or let it go versus evolving with it?
Hmm. Hmm. I'm thinking back of all of the like biggest leaps that I've taken, and something that really comes to mind is like when I cold turkey quit drinking alcohol. Like that was my whole identity, the party lifestyle of like going out 2 or 3 times a week, blacking out, like doing crazy things. And it got to a point where there was just this click. And I was like, well, I'm not going I hate my life right now and I'm not going to continue like this. So like I got to shift things. And I think it's this like when something burns, I think it's that. It's that sense of this identity is actually harmful to me and the people around me. It's time to like really burn it down. And then for an evolution, if I could, go back a few months ago, when I moved to Mexico, like the program that I was selling the 3 month was a good program. I loved it. I was getting good results. And I chose to burn it down, and that didn't need to happen. But when we're used to, it's familiar for us to have these like burning down our identity structures when we're met with a threshold that is asking us to evolve, that can be the like patterned response. Because there's a lot of fire, right? Fire of transformation in our bodies. And so essentially, like what I say in my rebirth language is that um, we can crumble and rise all at once. So rather than using that fire to burn down, like your offer suite, um, your friendships, whatever it is that's evolving for you, when we're surrounded by mentors, friends, people that have walked themselves through the fire of evolution, of transformation many times, we get to have those mirrors of perspective to show us those precise points of like discernment of what inner structures are wanting to evolve, and can we hold the fire there, hold the energy, the frequency of transformation inwardly to allow that to shift rather than being super like projecting that fire onto the external things from a discomfort or maybe even a like maxed out capacity of looking, or rather like maxed out capacity or like not enough, not the correct support, can be two sides of the same coin to actually do that um deeper inner transformation. It's being asked of an evolution.
What I feel is like keeping this fire as a constructive energy versus a destructive energy or something like that along those lines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me to the next question about feminine power. I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering what myths about feminine power dissolve once you've gone through ego death?
Mm. The myths of feminine power. Hmm. What are some of the myths of feminine power? I want to hear your perspective on this. Can we go back and forth a little bit?
Hmm. Myths of feminine power. Well, we oftentimes hear that, okay, feminine means receptive,
Mm-hmm.
feminine means receptive, yeah. I don't want to say passive, but sometimes behind receptive, we can also hear passive.
Like the shadow side of receptive.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything that is attraction based in feminine power, like being the magnet and knowing that you have this power of attraction, but not necessarily understanding like when they are manufactured versus when they are natural and just connected to your instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Something around that.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking like, again, from a business perspective, a lot of people will say like feminine business when the branding is around a show of like, look how fun and wild and crazy I am, and like fireworks and bikinis and like all that fun stuff. Like I love it, right? And there can be like a light, airy um frequency around that that can create a myth that that is the totality of the attraction method for business success. But in reality, like feminine energy and masculine energy could never exist in isolation, right? Like they are two sides of the same coin of wholeness, of consciousness expressing itself through an individual. And so I think like one of the myths that burns from uh femininity in a rebirth is like actually integrating the masculine aspect of like you're going to have to talk to people and invite them into your world, right? It's not just going to be like, hey, I'm going to dance in my garden and I'm suddenly going to be a millionaire, which I think can be a myth. Joining like bigger spaces where there isn't as much like one-to-one support to bridge the divide between the branding and the actual needle movers in your business. Another thing I want to mention too is that like whenever I think of femininity, I always like to think of like the different goddess archetypes, right? So we have like Saraswati, who is this like beautiful, soft, angelic, like she's playing her instrument. She has like a swan next to her. She's always in the flower garden. But we also have Kali Ma, who is like has a necklace of skulls of men that she's vanquished. She's dripping with blood, and her eyes are wildly with her primal life force. And I have chills up my legs. Kali's very present with me in this era. But other eras, it's been Saraswati, and so it's not like one or the other of like the soft feminine or like the wild primal feminine. It's again an integration, just as in our different aspects of action or receptivity. It's an integration of both the softness and the like fierce fire. And I think that in the world we live in, a lot of people want to like box us into one thing, especially when we're building brands. It's honestly like it can be easier to think of like, oh, this is my thing and to repeat it. But that ease is actually like a fragmentation from the totality, which when we're activating our audacious frequency, it is actually more easeful to be in that wholeness of both our like light, soft feminine and our like dark feminine that is a badass at discernment.
And I've been feeling more attracted lately by mentors who are transparent about what it takes to back up success and power.
hmm
And that what we see from an external point of view is everything that seems to be easy. So they have money, they have resources, they have a team, they've gone up the ladder, quote unquote, or
hmm
they have quantum leaps. And it just happened, it just happened. But this myth of ease also, and not to say that it cannot be easy or it cannot be done with ease, but I also feel that we sometimes tend to forget that there is work behind this.
hmm
And especially in the online business world, like as someone who still have a 9 to 5 job, I've been seeing in the online business world that people are completely rejecting the paradigm of like the 9 to 5 jobs that are, by the way, very important for like the systems to remain alive. Like if you need to go to the grocery shopping to buy your food, or if you need to go to the dentist because you have pain in your tooth or something, like, those jobs are still important. But what I mean is, it's almost like, okay, we are an online business to make our life easier, which is, of course, a goal. It's something we aspire to. But if we want to be completely transparent, most online business owners work much more than a 9 to 5. Yes, they have freedom of time. I agree. But if you add up all the time they spend on their phone or the computer, most of them work much more than a 9 to 5. So I've been really enjoying some of the mentors right now in the online space being more transparent about the work it takes behind success and this level of power.
Yeah. Because like from that place of transparency, then that is where genuine relationships build. Otherwise, it's like, the proximity is just a facade. It's not real. And I like what you said about the like bashing 9 to 5s, because I could definitely like put myself in that camp at certain stages. And what comes to mind is like in this future society, like this ideal utopic, um, like new Earth reality, of course, we would love to have everyone rooted in a purpose that feels like nourishing and self-sustainable rather than being reliant on like a grocery store or a dentist that's outside of your like small local community. But like the reality is we're not fully there yet. And saying that, like I would get so angry when I've had mentors before that have told me that, specifically in terms of um, looking at like the epigenetic causes of, parents' nervous systems and of like experiences that their children are having. I'm like, what? Like I'm there. And so it can be this like disillusionment, disorienting thing for visionary people. And it comes back to what we were saying before. It's like, well, we know that like the way things are structured in society are not how they need to be, not how they always will be. And there's also an element of can we be real and transparent and grounded in where we are in this moment and to make choices with that like dual awareness.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's like acknowledging where we are, how systems can be supportive with what is. Because we need to remember business is not necessarily a preference for everyone either. So, what if some people enjoy having a job and enjoy having this, predetermined schedule because they know where they're going and they like it this way? So it's also like, again, like quantum truth, acknowledging that different truths can coexist and that because having a business is our preference, it doesn't mean it's everyone else's preferences. So anyway, that's a topic for another time, but I just felt the importance of this as we know systems are evolving and a lot of old systems are right now crumbling themselves. They are not able to support the needs and the aspirations of the new society, the new civilization, the new earth. And I'm gonna move toward that topic. I know you are passionate about ancient empires like
Mm.
Atlantis and Egypt. And I'd like to know what can we learn from the rise and falls of those ancient empires in our own evolutionary pathway, especially as newer CEOs.
Mhm. So at the core of all of these ancient empires, and like this is why you see this common thread between all of them, even though they never had contact in history, is this depth of connection and receptivity to the guidance of spirit, great beyond, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, right? Usually there is some type of alignment with like the stars, and we could go into a whole conversation of the consciousness of the stars and each of them being like a portal to a different universe and civilization that has um you know, real society and consciousness that can be channeled and can be guidance that we build from. And some of those guidance allowed things like architecture of like city structure, both physically and also relationally, right? And so that is something that like is infinite that we can tune into. So the way that our businesses are designed, the way that our like neighborhoods are designed, our cities are designed, and our interpersonal relationships, both like in family unit, parent-child relationships, mentor-mentee, friendships, there's an energetic template there, right? And the one that's been placed upon what these ancient civilizations would have been tuning into to build has a lot to do with fear-based control systems, right? And if we're looking at just like, I'm gonna pick apart the 9 to 5 a little bit here, right? Like you have to show up at a specific location at a specific time to receive a predetermined financial amount that is required to pay for your mortgage if you live in a house, to have like shelter, to pay for the food from the grocery store, to have that sustenance that are our basic needs. So when we look at these ancient civilizations, what we see is this. fear-based structures of control of society as we know it now weren't there. It didn't exist in that way. There were no grocery stores, there were no like 9 to 5 jobs, right? And these were some of the most advanced civilizations that history has ever seen. So what's up? What's going on? Right? And so we talked about the stars, but also the earth, right? The earth has consciousness. The plants, like if you are receptive, if you're attuned, they have guidance for us as well. And there's different things that we can do, different like embodiment, you know, taking your shoes off, putting your soles of your feet on the ground. We have like chakras, energy portals on our feet to have that connection, even just spending time in nature, right? We're absorbing these codes unconsciously. And so when we bring that into our conscious awareness, both as the bridge between the earth and the stars, like what are we creating from that space? And that is what these ancient civilizations had the spaciousness to tune into because these fear-based systems of control weren't placed over top of that, what I would call like original or divine or organic template of how we're building, of how we're being. And so, what we can do here now today, as things are, is be aware of how we are being in relationship with people. Is our warmth, openness, compassion, empathy, love, connection dependent on a specific outcome, a specific behavior, as would be conditioned in the school system, right, at every level? Um, and in a lot of parental units because there wasn't that spaciousness to be listened, attuned, and receptive because of the demands to keep up, right? You see in the cycle that I'm illuminating. And so maybe like who you are right now doesn't have the like capacity to shift the big picture, but the microcosm and the macrocosm, big picture being like society, universal order. The microcosm is our relationship with ourselves and how that feeds into our relationships with others. So, where can we be more compassionate, more understanding of being able to hold that quantum truth? And on the flip side, it like the quantum mirror of power. How many times in relationships are you just listening to your friends, your families drone on the same looping like problems, like perspectives over and over again? And if you are someone who has been doing inner work, like at the beginning, it's going to be like, why don't you see it this way? But once you've been on the path for a long time, like you know how to hold yourself in that duality. And so you get to hold the people in your life in that way too, and lead by example, like, just by taking rest, by being in nature, by um allowing for a portion of your reality, of your schedule to operate outside of the restrictions and rigid structures of for-profit and time-based systems, right? Where connection can exist for pleasure, for play, for joy.
This is so important, and I want to emphasize something that you said, spaciousness as a resource. And we are online entrepreneurs. So the noise, the level of noise in the online space right now, not just in the mentorship spaces, but just
Yes.
at large in the online space, is phenomenal. And I feel that the key for a sustainable future in the online space is also this ability to use the online space is in the way that is actually supportive versus getting lost into it. And I just wanted to hear your take on that, especially
Mhm.
that I know you've been voluntarily withdrawing
Mhm.
um, to, to ground during this period of void and crumble.
Hmm. So when we invest really any amount, right? From like a $33 offer to like 25K or more, there's an energetic tie that's being created that exists within our sense body. And there can there is a communication that happens there. And so whenever that space is putting something out, that's going to create a pull. And what has happened for me as like this past 2 years is the first time I've ever invested in something like high level that's ongoing, like a year-long space. There's a sense of, oh, there's something going on. I've paid for this. I need to be there to get the value out of it. Some spaces are designed in that way, right? And that can cause distraction or it can cause expansion. It really depends. And what it depends on is, again, that inner discernment with where you're at in your life cycle, what other needs are present. Like it's the way let's take you for example, a mother of two that has a 9 to 5 is going to show up to a mentorship space over a year-long period is going to be so different than someone who, you know, doesn't have kids, is full-time in their business, and like maybe also like has a husband that supports their travels, right? So getting really honest with who we are, what our needs are, and taking an inventory of like that on a continual basis. And I remember this was a really, really challenging thing for me to learn. I'm like remembering this therapy session that I had, oh my God, like probably even 10 years ago now, where he took out a whiteboard and was like writing down all the things that I said I needed to do. And he's like, all right, here are the days of the week, here are the hours, and like we really broke it down. And he's like, so like this doesn't fit, so like what can go? And I'm like, nothing can go, right? Very different person at that point, very like just overachiever, overdrive all the time. Um, and there's still like the remnants of that exist for me and for many people. So recognizing when is a season of like maybe you do want to show up to all the calls, maybe you do have like that spaciousness, maybe the mentor is teaching on something that is like very pertinent to the specific needle mover that is relevant to your level of business, to the season that you're in, to the other um you know requirements of your attention at that time. Okay. And also recognizing, like for me right now, everything is just like exploded around me. That's gonna take like some time to recalibrate to like be like, okay, because even though this is happening, I'm still in the seat of belief that I am the conscious creator of my experience. So why did I create this? Right? Without shaming or blaming myself, and that can be like a part of the journey as well. Like, why did I create this shitstorm of chaos that's going on right now? And can I give myself the spaciousness, which means pulling back from some other of the um, spaces where my attention was going, which was being on calls, which was being very active on social media in different Telegram threads of like responding DMs, like posting all of these things. So I like to think of it like, like as a like a DJ deck, and there's all these different dials that you can like put up or down and like increase the volume of like the like rebound, like I don't know if that's the correct term, but all of these different aspects, like we are the DJ of our lives. And sometimes we want to be at a silent disco and we want to be listening to like smooth jazz, and sometimes we want to be like at a rave listening to EDM. And we get to make that choice of like when to pull back or when to lean in. Ooh,
Thank you
and
for,
one last
yeah,
thing I want to say, and allowing that to be detached from a financial investment. So that's like getting into the relationship of the conversation of our relationship with money and how so funny. I was at a dinner the other day and someone was saying that money equals control. I'm like, that's an interesting belief. Right. And that you needed to like be like this control freak to have money. Like, interesting. Okay.
yes. I think we could do a complete podcast episode about money beliefs and money rewiring.
Mhm.
Um, that would be interesting. And what you were talking about, that honestly, that take was so important. I feel that everyone in the online space should hear what you just said about discernment in how you show up and that being detached from any investment that you did. And I totally relate because I am in a high level and high proximity mentorship space that does cost a lot of money. And I haven't shown up since September, but the only time I showed up, I won a one-on-one with the leader. So I think that's pretty cool. Like this is what we call timing and precision, right? So it's all about this discernment and connecting to the feeling and intuition of like how am I actually supposed to use that space.
Mhm.
Okay, so another question I had about the ancient civilizations was that as a new Earth CEO, how do you translate ancient systems of initiation? Because I know initiations is part of your approach
Mhm.
into modern structures or into your offers.
Mm. I love this question so much. So I really see every offer as an initiation. Because I'm an alchemist, I have my essence, and each offer I put out in the world has its own essence as well. And those are coming together to create a third thing that we don't have control over. And whenever we have to let go of control, whenever there's an evolution, that's an initiation. And the way our modern society is set up is that we're so focused on profit, on outcomes, on productivity and less relationally that these initiations can be overlooked in the pursuit of those things. And where I like to do things differently is that I like to create spaces that actually addresses both the conversation of what's going on beneath the surface and also the embodied experience and to really like dive into the like intimacy of that of our emotional landscape as well. Because the way I see it is like our emotions are the communication system that's interfacing between our soul and our external reality through our body. So when we speak of like an initiation, let's say in business, we're putting out a new offer. Maybe it's at a higher price point than any of our previous offers. Maybe there's more people in it than any of our previous offers. That is going to like influence the baseline of our nervous system, of our aura, like whatever perspective we want to take on it. And so rather than focusing solely on do X to get Y business structure, I like to invite a full spectrum of the conversation. And I love that you do this in your offers as well. You bring forward, okay, like this is like do X to get Y. And also, when you do X or when you get Y, what's the feedback? What's happening in the system? Both like our internal system, our emotions, but also like our family systems, our relationship systems, because there's going to be a recalibration in all of those aspects. And so before I was really focused on business, which is kind of ironic because I have a business degree, but between doing that and having like a more spiritual orientation to life, I started going to a lot of women's circles. And there, the whole conversation is like, how are you feeling about it? What's going on in your relationships? What's challenging for you? Like all these things. But I found there that the action piece, the strategy piece of like, okay, how do we take this and move forward with it was missing. And so in my spaces to hold the fullness of an experience of initiation, like launching a 10x offer, gets to be part of the conversation and is informing the branding, the marketing, the client experience, and all of these touch points.
And what dropped while you were talking is like what truly is a 10x offer, because what people forget is that to fill your 10x offer, you need a pathway.
Hmm.
So instead of talking about the 10x offer and checking that off your list, it's more about where are the people, and is there any people in your pathway? And if yes, how can you drive them to your 10x offer? Like, of course, it has to exist, but again, like that's the feminine power that we were talking about
Hmm.
earlier. It's like this false ease of like, okay, I created a payment link and a 10x offer, and now like I'm gonna become a millionaire. No, there's an actual structure and there's actual work behind the process of filling your 10x offer. Like people are investing their time into navigating with the people in their ecosystem so they can actually get to that 10x offer. Like they make their way into it, and there's another layer of work to maintain the people in the 10x offer. Because as you mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, at some point you will wake up from the dream and be like, does it still align? Do I truly want this? Does it still make sense in my life right now? And am I still able to hold that investment?
Hmm.
So again, like it's funny because all the pieces are coming together. That's very interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you, one last question about the ancient civilizations, is I'd like to know which one has most shaped your understanding of power, governance, and legacy. Because I know you like to study them and you have made some research. And I'd like you to give us an example of like how this knowing impacts your life now.
Oh my God. You're
That's a big
asking me
one.
to choose? Like I can't choose. Oh my gosh. So multi-layered. Okay, I'll start with the main three and then I'll kind of work my way into like a more focused answer from there. So the main ones have been Atlantis, Egypt, and the Mayan Aztec empire. And I feel like they each have a piece to the puzzle. So let's start with the Atlantean one. This one has been like I've had a conscious draw to it of like curiosity. And it wasn't until really like this year, and specifically meeting Natalie Wallace, that a lot more of the conscious pieces dropped in around it of this relationship we have to technology, both like our like physical technology of AI, but also frequency technology, sound technology, crystal technology, all of these things. And like this priestess path, right? Well, like what does it mean to be a priestess? For me, it means to consciously walk through these portals of initiation and to then be a guide for others who are walking through those portals. And with that one, like the big imbalance in power ended up being this over emphasis, over value on the technology and of like what we can do with our minds, which ended up falling into more of a control system that we can see the ripples of now, versus this. balance with the depth of connection with earth intelligence of like the body of the cycles of nature, of honoring that like sacred pause through the different seasons rather than exponential productivity because we have the technology and the intelligence and the tools to do it, right? That's when you see the wobbles of things like intense climate change, of like this crack in the literal face of the earth in somewhere in Africa, or the tectonic plates just are like, you know, like the earth is responding all of these like fires and floods and stuff like that. So that's like again the ripples of when things get out of balance. Um, then when we look at um Egyptian civilization, they have like a very similar flavor. And interestingly, like I don't know as much about the fall of the Egyptian civilization. I know about the rise of, again, like the priestess path of like initiating through these like chambers where people were like set in a pool of water, and there was like people around them holding frequency through sound to attune energetically to hold certain positions in society, those being different initiations. And like that, what I'm just, this is coming through now of like where is the attunement to integrity in our leaders, right? That could be a whole podcast. Because the way power was perceived in that civilization was, yes, there was like a status and a caste, but within that too, like if you read any of these stories, I've been reading Isis and Osiris' story recently, like they were they were doing some high magic. They were deeply connected with the earth and with the stars, and like moving with these cycles to create miracles. Right? Um, and and the in that story, like Seth, the brother, um, had this like anger and this vengeance and this control, and you can see like the play of the dance of the unfolding of the universe through these different um polarities, and that's always going to exist in each individual as well. Like from that I think we can learn like how do we play with our shadow in the way that we wield our power? And is that something that we're doing consciously or unconsciously to manipulate outcomes? Yeah, there, I found the thread. I didn't have it in my mind. I had to talk ourselves through it. Okay. And then finally, um, like Mayan Aztecs. Oh my gosh. Like the whole pull that I have here to Mexico where I live now is like that discernment of Maya, like what is illusion, what is real. And then in that, yeah, right. In that, and it's like, from the beginning of this podcast, what's happening here in my time in Mexico to like this, like there's ripples, there's connections. Um, in that culture, I was sitting at the top of one of the pyramids here where I live for now in Cholula, and people were literally brought up to the top of these pyramids, throats slit, blood trailed down the bottom to the bottom, and like sometimes thrown off the edge, and there's like daggery points sticking out. And like that was seen as such a like high sacrifice celebration. And like so savage. But from that, we can see too this this thread of like sacrificing our physical body for something else, something, arguably like greater than ourselves for tradition. Like there's so many different perspectives we can take on this, which like if we're coming back to the conversation on a 9 to 5, like what toll is it taking on our body? And then in our family relationships, like what traditions are we perpetuating that create this like illusory dynamic of connection, but really it's like harmful. And that can take some time to untangle and unfold. And all of these things were done in the name of like maintaining the balance of nature. Something that I love about I was gonna say New Age, but I just don't know the sources of this one tradition is as women like collecting our menstrual blood and giving it back to the earth. And there's like a legend that says like if all women did that, then the earth would have the blood that it needs to like keep the balance of nature and we wouldn't be at war anymore. And I think there's something poetic in there, but also like the thread of truth is that like connection that we have to our bodies as part of the systems and not systems, a part, well, yeah, that too, of the cycles of nature. And like how are we living in devotion to that connection in everything that we do? When we have the technology, when we have the mind intelligence to override it, what choices are we making?
I feel that just this last sentence would be enough for everyone to have a breakthrough right now. Like, forget about the rest of the podcast. Just listen to that one sentence. That's perfect. Um, okay, I feel we've spent enough time about ancient civilizations, and before we finish today together, I want to bring you to Star Nations. So we started talking about you as a rebirth queen, and then you and your connection to ancient civilizations. And I also know that you're a master decoder because I'm one too. And we know each other. I know you are a shapeshifter. And I know you have these special connections with the Star Nations. And what I'd like to know is when was your first um, cosmic memory or this first time that you felt the connection with the Star Nations? And can you talk about it to demystify
Yeah.
this connection?
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so I this is like a story through like that I've been told about myself from childhood. I literally like told my mom, I was like, I come from the stars, right? So I believe that all children come in with so much wisdom and connection because they were like just right there, right? In the like cosmic soup of it all. And that's something that we get to nurture, but that's another podcast too. Let's keep it on me. Um, and then I remember like so many times throughout my childhood, just like looking up at the night sky and having this sense of like homesickness. And this is still something that I carry of just like feeling such a deep, deep, deep connection to um like civilization and consciousness and outside of what we see here. Here as an Earth. Um, and so that was kind of like the 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 seeds. The biggest like cosmic remembrance came through for me after sitting with plant medicine with ayahuasca, where I experienced like a psychic surgery. And I had this like complete amnesia of not 000 connection to any memory of like it was like I was being born as like an infant baby again. I was looking around the room and like being like, where am I? Like, what am I doing? My sister was across the room, and I remember seeing her and being like, I have a feeling, like, I have a feeling about this being, like, who's that? And then the word sister came up, and I was like, what's sister? What does that mean? Right? And it was this like relearning. Um, and after that, there was like a Star Nation guide that's kind of just like always been around me. And like whenever I like close my eyes and tune in, like I can see, feel, and know their guidance. And I'd really say that is the catalyst to starting my business. Because after business school, where you learn about corporate business and how to make like billions for companies that are already making billions, it's like, I don't want to do this shit. Like, fuck that. Like, I want joy, I want happiness, I want close relationships, I want to explore the world. And so through that, like, Star Nation connection, that sense of home is inside of me, and I have the creative power to create what people would say like heaven on earth, a new earth realities through the portal of my business. Like that's really how it grounds and like solidifies for me because, we can like sit in meditation our whole lives and receive these messages, but what are we going to do with them?
Thank you for opening to my next question with a red carpet. So, this is exactly what I was going to ask you. What does cosmic origin actually change in the way you make decisions on Earth? And you mentioned your business, but what else? Like, how does this influence the way you move into this planetary reality?
Mhm. Well, people have often like seen me as very strange, and I've even had people like be like, "You're an alien." And I'm like, "Well, alien consciousness, but I'm coming to you from Earth this time." Um, but essentially, like, it's being able to see beyond these bonds and like socially conditioned fields of belief and to choose differently. It doesn't mean it's going to be comfortable. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it does mean there is an awareness there of when someone, including myself, is operating from the conditioned experience from a trigger. And it's that understanding, right? It's like, okay, if my partner has like wide eyes and is like doing a bunch of things at the same time and like I really want to have a moment of connection with him. Well, I know that like whatever I'm going to say to him, he's not going to be able to receive it in that state. It doesn't take like cosmic consciousness to recognize that. But this is like a very grounded day-to-day example. But yeah, like some people it might. Really, the core essence of it for me is being able to embody the frequency of unconditional love. And that starts with ourselves. And so when I'm having these moments of like collapse in my business and my bank account and my relationships and my living situation, it's like, can I hold on to the feeling of love for myself, of trust in the unfolding of this process, despite what I'm seeing in my physical reality, despite what I'm feeling in my physical body. Because, like, let me tell you, it has been intense to walk myself through the density of what's present and the past and future ripples that are coming through all the time, right? And I think that really is like the core of integrating this cosmic frequencies is connection, right? Making decisions from a place of connection instead of disconnection. Whereas disconnection is going to, it feels empty to me. It's like this hollowness. It's this like deflation. Like like I would say like disconnections like this, or it could be like rah, right? So it's like that middle way of we're taking actions, we're making mistakes, both in business and relationships, right? Like we're testing things out and staying committed in our devotion to like what the grander mission is really. Because you can really see in someone when they're led by that force rather than the force of climbing some illusory ladder to the most status, the most prestige, the most everything.
Frequency doesn't lie. I'd like to complete the interview or podcast meeting with a very special question. So lately we had a conversation, a private conversation in Instagram DMs, and we were recoding reality, watching all sorts of reels and carousels together that we were sending each other.
Uh-huh.
And we had a moment of touching like another layer. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. We had a moment of touching another layer of reality through this decoding of the
Mhm.
online information we were exchanging with each other.
Mhm.
And interestingly, I cannot remember exactly what were our findings. And then this is when I came to the point to tell you I feel like I'm having a trip right now, you know? And
Yes.
and what you answered was so funny. You told me, "Yeah, I'm the trip." And I thought that's a beautiful metaphor because when I go so deep in the analysis of information I receive, I usually feel I'm navigating the dimensions. It's like
Hmm.
I see reality beyond reality beyond reality.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure what my question is, but I'd like you to tell us more about the I'm the trip declaration.
Yeah. What you had said was that this conversation felt like an ayahuasca trip, and I was like, I am the trip. Um, and what I mean by that is that again, like that dual awareness of being able to see like what is something that has been conditioned unconsciously into the fabric of humanity, right? We have all of these power dynamics, these archetypal energies that exist beyond our level of conscious perception unless you've like studied it and within yourself and within other people and learn to like what you say decode those patterns. And I can't exactly remember what the point of that conversation was, but I think the essence was that we like reached a zero point of consciousness, right? Where we were sitting like if you can imagine like in the records, like Akashic records, where we're just like sitting in the middle and everything's kind of like swirling around us and every possibility of every dimension and every timeline. We're just like, whoa, it's kind of cool. But yeah. And that's really what happens when you sit with plant medicine. It removes the veils of separation that have been built up in your psyche that prevents that connection and communication between different parts of your consciousness. So we're all operating with multiple parts of self. And the more we're in that, like, I'm going to borrow from the yogic lineage again, svadhyaya or self-study, the more we deepen our seat of awareness until we get to that zero point, that's like that Brahma, right? Of like just observing the whole universe, right? Where we can see our like our Atma, our soul, and we can see like the chitta of the mind. We come to that like chitta vritti shodhana, like this the mind is becoming still and observing itself, where the fluctuations of consciousness have settled. And like that's a trippy experience. I remember the first time I really touched that, like what we could say like samadhi, like this bliss consciousness. It like if your nervous system doesn't have an embodied reference point of an experience, it will be shortly after met with fear and terror. And so like that's what happens is like this big like pendulum swing. It's like, oh my God, what was that? And so um I like to invite people into that space with loving presence and gentleness and connection and trust and like consent, right? So we were just having a conversation about, I think it had something to do with like social norms, business norms, something in those lines. And I was just like, well, here's a mirror. Here's a 0 point truth. Let's sit in it together. And like that's a trippy experience. And that's what I like to do in my spaces. And that's what leads to the rebirth, being able to observe from moment to moment basis reality from that point of awareness.
All right. So I feel this was a very interesting spiraling conversation around being the rebirth queen and being connected to the knowledge of ancient civilizations, using their keys to implement into your business as a new Earth CEO, and then moving through the special link with the Star Nations and the Star Nation guide that you met through an ayahuasca journey. But
Mhm.
really, that was part of your field since birth or probably before even.
Yeah.
So happy to have this conversation with you and remembering that you are the trip. And I don't know why, but I feel this for you is a very important metaphor. Understanding that the 0 point of consciousness is something that we can lose sight of,
Mhm.
especially again through the noise of being in the online space and just living in 2025, 2026. It's just an era of noise.
Mhm.
So finding that stillness and finding the spaciousness where we can actually become the one living and the one watching and the one witnessing, like being in the keeper position or the
Mm.
position of like the what we call the meta position
Yeah.
is so important because a trigger that is not processed can destroy so much and
Yeah.
it can burn bridges. And that's part of like, do I burn it down or do I evolve with it? So we
Mm.
always have the choice to either burn something down or, process it, alchemize it, and make something new out of it. So I feel that's that's my takeaway for this conversation. And I'll let you close with your own words.
Thank you. Thank you so much for for all of the questions and your presence and your energy for being here. Both you, Audrey, and also the listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And we love to have these conversations. So, if anything in here sparked an insight or a follow-up question, a curiosity, then our DMs are always open to have those conversations. So all of our links will be here in the show notes that you can tune in with us and um, hear about what connection is there for us being like you and I, the listener. That feels complete. Thank you.